of Britain's biggest independent television companies has warned that programme standards could plummet if ITV is totally deregulated in the government's broadcasting white paper published next Monday. But many advertisers say deregulation and increased competition from satellite stations for viewers and revenue will only increase choice. In the second of our special reports on the television revolution, Penny Marshall has been looking at how one station, TVS, has been changing for the future.
ITV boasts that its children's programmes are amongst the best in the world, but TVS believes the government's deregulation plans could destroy them. They argue that expensive programmes like this, which don't attract a mass audience, will not survive once the competition for viewers intensifies.
You'll see children's programmes disappear and be replaced by other forms of cheaper programming. You'll see religious programming disappear, you'll see the arts programmes disappear, you'll see the farming information programmes disappear. All the panoply of programmes that we happily and willingly do as a service to our viewers, they will all go.
Currently, ITV, like the BBC, is obliged to make these programmes as a service to the public. But that obligation is to be eased, and without it, there are fears the drive for profits will kill them off. But their potential competitors say that's just vested interest disguised as public interest.
The fact is that ITV currently want to protect their very comfortable position from competition. Living in a marketplace with real competition is a lot less comfortable for them. If one thinks back to 1955, when the ITV was invented, everyone said from the BBC that inventing new competition was going to damage standards. It hasn't. Competition enhanced them.
TVS is one of the 15 companies that make up ITV. At present, each enjoys a virtual monopoly on advertising. Their franchise to broadcast is granted by the IBA, which also regulates the programmes. But the IBA is to be replaced by an authority with less regulatory powers. And despite praise for ITV's programmes, their monopoly has been described as a licence to print money. But TVS maintains that the present system benefits the viewers.
Total deregulation, wherever it's happened in other countries, has led to a plummeting of programming standards.
And it's been looking at deregulated Italy to make its point.
This is on 5 nights a week between 10:30 and 11:30 at night. Now, I'm not saying that will happen. It could happen when you've got masses of stations heading to attract any form of audience.
But the advertisers totally reject this. They say they don't just want any form of audience, they target their products very carefully for very good reasons.
So advertisers certainly do care about the quality, both in production values of individual programmes and the standard of the schedule that's put together overall. Quite simply, an ever-increasing number of total advertisers are targeting very sophisticated products. Financial services, corporate advertising, upscale motor cars, etc., are all targeted at rather upper and middle income groups. And clearly, populist programming, down-market quizzes and soaps are not in the main watched by the consumers of those products.
So the people who make the commercials and then pay ITV to show them believe the market will regulate itself. They say ITV's resistance to deregulation smacks of self-interest. 15 on time. And that's because when the commercial forces are unleashed on the ITV companies, they could lose money and even their franchises. TVS is preparing for that future, cutting its costs and investing in regional programming to beat back the competition. And at the same time, it's gone international, broadening its revenue base by acquiring the American studio MTM.
The magic of MTM.
That makes and owns such best-selling programmes as Hill Street Blues. But despite TVS's expansion, it'll still be vulnerable after deregulation in the fiercely commercial environment. Even now, there are bigger, richer and more ruthless players, and they're just waiting for the signal to move in. Penny Marshall, ITN, Southampton.
Weekend, ministers will be putting the finishing touches to the broadcasting white paper before it's published on Monday. Today, in the third of our special reports on the television revolution, Jeremy Thompson looks at what's happened in Australia since deregulation there.
8755, take one.
In a Melbourne studio, they're shooting the latest episode of Neighbours, the show that shapes Britain's view of Australia and its television. Just one of 5 Aussie soaps currently running on British TV. Yet this daily fiction hardly compares with the real-life drama that's shaken up the Australian television industry itself in the last 18 months. With proprietors now allowed to control more than 2 stations, commercial television was networked Australia-wide for the first time. The latest tycoons were all new to big-time TV. Prestige was a factor, though 9's Alan Bond, 7's Christopher Skase and 10's Frank Lowy admitted they were in it for money.
We bought into the business because we feel that it'll be a good investment.
Ironically, it's shows like 60 Minutes that top Australia's ratings, not Britain's imported favourite Neighbours.
A tycoon with a television channel is utterly amoral in programming, that they'd run grand opera or public executions, depending on what worked.
10 News with Steve
What sells best is news and current affairs, the flagships in the ferocious ratings war down under. The new bosses injected big dollars to win over viewers. Channel 9, the market leader, broadcasts 6.5 hours of news and current affairs from breakfast to bedtime every weekday. Programmes and presenters relentlessly promoted.
This is Brian Henderson. Good night.
Much of the fresh money has been pumped into launching new shows like Channel 10's glossy look at current affairs, Page 1. Among the experiments, an irreverent late-night view of news from Network 9's Graham Kennedy.
Commercial TV networks present nothing else but pop news, a fact that seems to have escaped the dim-witted hacks that have reviewed our show.
The first live audience news show in the world. Many call it tabloid television. Alongside news, sport is an essential ingredient of Australia's commercial formula. With government rules ensuring major investment in Australian programming, homegrown popular drama has seen a revival as stations woo viewers and ratings. The ABC, Australia's public sector equivalent of the BBC, now finds itself eclipsed in the ratings and fighting to justify its existence as a producer of quality and variety. Though former BBC producer Jonathan Holmes, now with ABC, highlights an essential difference between the British and Australian approach.
The people in British television, most of whom have worked at some point or other in the BBC or with that ethos, give the population on the whole what they think is good for them and what they want to work on, rather than what the public actually want to watch. The broadcasters in Australia think that their job is to supply what the public wants. That's the difference.
However, the high flyers of commercial television are finding the cost of chasing the ratings has squeezed profits to the margin. The TV tycoons have spent billions buying the stations, millions more trying to beat each other. But with audiences declining and the advertising revenue barely keeping ahead of inflation, some may soon find the return on their investments disappointing. As Alan Bond is discovering, television does have its regulations. The Australian Broadcasting Tribunal is currently investigating whether he's fit to run 14 TV and radio stations. It's alleged he threatened to use his television channels to manipulate business rivals. If it goes against him, he could lose his licence to broadcast. Jeremy Thompson, ITN, Australia.
Well, now here's something you don't see on television every day, even in deregulated New York. A live TV debate that really got the audience going. When a skinhead leader started to racially abuse a black civil rights campaigner, things started to get out of hand. As the punches flew, security men moved in to try and separate the two sides. The talk show's host suffered a broken nose in the crossfire, and the subject that sparked the whole thing off, tolerance.